Hello everyone and welcome to the webinar today, Introduction to the USDA Funding Program for the Solid Waste Management Grant Program. This webinar is intended for local organizations interested in learning more about the solid waste management and have a more thorough understanding of the USDA funding and the environmental regulatory enhancement funding under the Administration for Native Americans. Real quick, a little bit about the Administration for Native Americans. ANA has a vision that Native communities are thriving. To achieve this, ANA provides discretionary funding to eligible applicants. In 2020, ANA had 6 funding opportunity application openings that organizations were able to submit proposals to. That was the Social and Economic Development Strategies, known as SEDS, the Social and Economic Development Strategies Alaska, which is referred to as SEDS AK. A new one, which was the Social and Economic Development Strategies for Growing Organizations, or SEDS GO, Language Preservation and Maintenance, or PNM, and the Esther Martinez Immersion, or EMI. And one that has the most significant connection to today's topic is the Environmental Regulatory Enhancement Grant application. ANA would like to see organizations building a healthy community using their discretionary funds. To achieve this vision, the Administration for Native Americans contracts with companies to provide training and technical assistance services to each of the 4 regions. There is the Eastern region, Western region, Alaska region, and the Pacific Basin region. If you are unsure which region you fall into, you can visit the ANA website and click on the Training and Technical Assistance tab for information and a map delineating the 4 regions by color. Sister Sky provides training and technical assistance to organizations that were funded under the NLCC cohort. Today's webinar is hosted by the Alaska Region Training and Technical Assistance Center. The Regional Training and Technical Assistance Center provide a multitude of resources to organizations within each of our regions. Trainings offered by the Training and Technical Assistance Center include Project Planning and Development, or PPD, Pre-Application Training, or PREAP, and Post-Award Training for organizations that receive funding through the Administration for Native Americans. Project planning and development participants will learn how to work with their community and key partners to identify and document specific problems that stand in the way of meeting their community goals. They will learn to create project work plans and address those problems to attain community goals. And they will develop measurable outcomes and impacts to the community. They will learn to determine the level of resources and funding needed to implement the project. Pre-application participants will learn how to register and apply through the grants.gov website. They will understand the Administration for Native American funding opportunity announcements and the evaluation criteria for each competition, and how to format, package, structure, and submit the application for the Administration for Native Americans funding consideration. Post-award participants will learn the reporting requirements, including the Objective Progress Report and Annual Data Report, and the tools and resources that are available to them. Technical assistance includes both the pre-application technical assistance and the unfunded technical assistance. Pre-application ETA is designed to provide individual assistance to prospective ANA applicants through phone, email, and fax. Please contact your regional TTA provider to register for pre-application ETA. If an organization has previously submitted an ANA application and was not selected for funding, they are eligible for what is referred to as unfunded technical assistance, where the TTA staff will review the submitted proposal and work to provide guidance on how to ensure that the criteria is more thoroughly addressed for resubmission in the next cycle. It is important to note that ANA strongly encourages Potential applicants should participate in each of the trainings. ANA, in partnership with the Regional and Training and Technical Assistance Centers, hosts webinars that cover a variety of topics. Topics include native language teacher retention strategies, introduction to the Enhanced Tribal Identification Card Program, and trusting youth to take the lead. And in today's instance, funding opportunities with other agencies. The webinars are done to ensure that regional training and technical assistance centers are providing participants with industry best practices, project ideas, and additional resources in the effort of achieving ANA's vision that Native communities are thriving. The regional training and technical assistance centers collaboratively develop manuals and toolkits that align with trainings that are offered. If you would like to learn more about the resources provided, please reach out to your regional training and technical assistance center. Today's webinar goals is that participants understand what USDA funding, the funding program is, who you should contact if you have questions or technical assistance questions, and general application requirements for submitting a USDA funding proposal. Today, we're going to have two guest presenters, Penny Douglas and Christopher Adamczyk. I hope I did not butcher that too.
Close enough.
Penny Douglas, you can see her bio there, is the lead individual that you will see in the funding opportunity announcement posted on the website. She started her career with the USDA in 1990 and has served rural communities throughout her career from offices in Mississippi, Iowa, Washington, D.C., and I believe now Tennessee. Chris Adamczyk has worked with the USDA Water and Environmental Programs Portfolio Management since 2019 and has worked as a loan producer in fiscal years 2015, 16, and 17. Both are very knowledgeable in today's topic, and we look forward to hearing more about today's topic. With that, I will turn it over to Penny and Chris.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is Chris, and before I start, I just want to make sure, Charles, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, awesome. Next slide, please. Good afternoon. We're very happy to be here and tell you all about the Solid Waste Management Grant Program. Your presenters, as Charles was explained today, are my colleague Penny Douglas and me, Chris Adamczyk. We're both community program specialists with the Water and Environmental Programs Division, or otherwise known as WEP, and we both work on the Solid Waste Management Grant Program. The topics we'll cover today, we'll go through the specifics of the Solid Waste Management Grant Program and touch on the Technical Assistance and Training Grant Program as well, although not in detail. Next slide, please. So I'm going back and forth between my notes, so it may take me a second sometimes when we switch slides. First off, you'll see the link there, and that link is the website to access all the information about the Solid Waste Management Program. You can find the regulation, the application guide, and in addition to that, last year's grantees and a fact sheet about the program. Now, one of the things to note when you go through the list of last year's grantees that's currently up there right now, it'll be the grantees from fiscal year 2019, not the ones that were awarded in this fiscal year, which is currently fiscal year 2020. We were still going through the approval and what we call obligation processes and doing the final legwork for this year's grant cycle. You'll likely won't see the 2020 grantees posted on our website for another several weeks or another few months. But I think if you go into our website and look at the grantees from 2019, just reading through them, you'll get a good idea, because there's a little narrative about what each of the projects are for the specific grantee, but it'll give you a good idea of what our grantees out there are doing with their projects. The two documents that are most important to access for developing the application are the 7 CFR 1775, and this is the regulation governing both the TAT, the Technical Assistance and Training Program, and the Solid Waste Management Grant Programs. And I just want to point out that the TAT, the TAT, or the Technical Assistance Training Grant is the other grant program that I just spoke about in the previous slide that we'll be touching on a little bit later. But that one concentrates primarily with technical assistance and training to the water and sewer entities in the communities, whereas solid waste management, or SWM, which is what we're primarily going to be talking about, is in regards to solid waste management in the community. But both of these grant programs are contained in the same regulation. Subparts A and B cover the application process and the general provisions of both programs. Subparts C and D are specific to the TAT and the SWM program respectively. The list of all required documents for applications and other important information are found in subparts C and D. And one of the things that you will want to keep an eye on, whether you're going through the regulation or the application guide, is to make sure that you're under the right grant program, because as I said before, the both grant programs are contained in the same regulation. And why I say that is because there are a number of sections with both programs that are similar, but there are also instances in there that are different, and there's some pretty significant differences between the two. So you just want to make sure that you're in the right portion of the regulations or the application guide. And that includes me when I go through it, when I'm looking up something in either the application guide or the regulation, I end up mistakenly looking in the TAT section as well. So that includes me, but just make sure that you're looking in the right section in regards to the solid waste management, or if you have any questions on the technical assistance training grant, the TAT grant. Next slide, please. The application guide covers the application process, the general provisions, and the required application items. They spell out the specifics of the application process, developing the application and the scoring criteria. And it tells the applicant the specific info to include in a proposal narrative. And I kind of, I pointed out on the last slide that your two most important resources are the regulations and the application guide. And the application guide, for lack of a better term, how I like to put it is that's the English, nice, rough and tough, easy to read guide of how to put together an application. But the regulations are obviously the actual backing regulations, which establishes the solid waste management grant program. But both the application guide and the regulations are your most useful resources in regards to putting together an application. Next slide, please. This is the website page that I mentioned earlier. This is what you'll see when you visit our solid waste management page, and you'll want to scroll down to the bottom of that to see for the links to the application guide and the regulation. Next slide, please. The applications for, the applications for the solid waste management program must be specifically directed towards solid waste issues that meet these objectives, which is A, to reduce or eliminate pollution of water resources, and or B, improve planning and management of solid waste sites. Next slide, please. The use of funds for the solid waste management grant programs, I'm actually going to read through these because obviously these are important. To provide technical assistance and or training to reduce the solid waste stream through reduction, recycling, and reuse. B is providing training to enhance operator skills and maintaining or operating active landfills. C, provide technical assistance and or training for operators of landfills which are closed or will be closed in the near future with the development or implementation of closure plans, future land use plans, safety and maintenance planning, and closure scheduling within permit requirements. E is to evaluate current landfill conditions to determine the threats of water resources. Next slide, please. Oh. And before I get into this section, I just want to point out, and if it wasn't fairly obvious with the eligible use of grant funds, but this program is obviously geared towards technical assistance and training as opposed to purchasing large-scale equipment or other means or other physical property in regards to correcting the solid waste needs for a community. And like I said, I know it's fairly obvious from what I was just explaining, but we do get questions a lot in regards to purchasing pieces of equipment, like a community wants to purchase a shredder so it could start a recycle program and purchase that shredder with grant funds. Stuff like that is ineligible for this program. It is for technical assistance and training. Onto eligible applicants. Eligible applicants must be either private nonprofits, public bodies, Native American tribes or groups, and or academic institutions. Next slide, please. Applicants must be legally established and located within a state as defined. A state is defined by the slide, which is any of the 50 states, District of Columbia, Commonwealth of Puerto Rico, Territory of Guam, the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands, the Republic of the Marshall Islands, the Federated States of Micronesia, the Republic of, I'm probably going to butcher this, but Palau, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. And the organization that's applying must be incorporated by December 31 of the year of the application period occurs. So to apply for the fiscal year 2021 grant program, the entity applying must be incorporated by December 31st of this year. Next slide, please. Also required is the proven ability, background, and experience to be able to operate a technical assistance and or training program. They also must have the legal capacity and the legal authority and capacity to be able to provide these services. Either the applicant itself must provide the proven ability, background, and experience, or its affiliate or contracted organization must have it. And the applicant cannot contract with a non-affiliated organization for more than 49% of the grant. So the applicant can contract out some of the services that'll be provided with the grant project, but those services cannot equate to more than 49% of the grant amount. So for just an example off the top of my head, if the applicant is awarded a $100,000 grant, no more than $49,000 could be contracted to a non-affiliated organization to provide the services of the project. The capacity must be documented for the applicant, affiliate, or contracted organization, and you're to provide all this information in the application. And it explains more on this in the application guide. Next slide, please. There are several limitations to the solid waste management grant program. such as duplicating services, political or lobbying activities, purchasing real estate or vehicles, improving or renovating office space, renovating or repairing or maintaining privately owned property, the construction, improvement, rehabilitation, modification, or operation, and maintenance of water, wastewater, or solid waste disposal facilities. Next slide. Constructing or furnishing a building, intervening in the federal regulatory or judiciary proceedings, suing the federal government or other government entities, paying for any other costs that are not allowable under the 2 CFR Part 200, making contributions or donations to others. Next slide, please. Duplicating technical assistance under the National Forest Dependent Rural Communities Economic Diversification Act of 1990, paying an outstanding federal judgment, recruiting applications for RUS or any other loan and grant program, or contracting with a non-affiliated agents organization for more than 49% of the grant costs, as I was discussing that before. I just want to go back for a second up to number L, which is recruiting applications for RUS, or as we like to term it on our end, grant writing or application writing or loan packaging type of services. Now, as it says in the little bullet point there, you can assist with the application preparation. An example that I'd like to give with this is, for example, if you're working with a potential applicant that's applying to USDA for a loan, for one of its loan programs for a solid waste management loan, you can help them, you can assist them with preparing their applications, assist them with the application materials, but you cannot actually do the documentation for them. An example that we'd recently had was an entity asked if they could do an environmental report on behalf of the applicant, and something like that would be ineligible. But they could assist them with the preparing of the document, they just can't do it for them. So the key with that portion is you can provide assistance with the application preparation. You just can't do you cannot do the documents or do the application for them. Next slide, please. The application window for this program is October 1 through December 31st. So obviously the application window will be opening October 1st of this year, which is approximately 33 days from now. And this is established through the regulations, and we have a regulatory obligation to start it on this date and close the application window on December 31st. And a couple of important things to note in regards to the application guide. The application guide you see on our website right now is for the previous fiscal year's application window. Now, you can go on there, and most of what you'll see on there for the application guide for 2020 is going to be utilized in the 2021 application guide. So, you don't have to wait until the new one gets posted on the website, because a good proportion of the information on there is going to be the same. We might just fine tune a couple of the explanatory pieces, and you could potentially see a change in the administrative points section. But for the most part, most of the information on there will be similar to what the 2020 document says. So the resource that's up there right now is a good piece to go in and look at. With that being said, we're in the process now of doing the updates necessary for the 2021 application guide. It should be posted on the website, if not by October 1, a little bit after that. So stay tuned to when that gets posted on the website. And the appropriations before I get into that part, another thing is that up until October 1st, or when the application window opens, we can answer specific questions you could have pertaining to your potential application if you decide to submit one in fiscal year 2021. After October, once the the application window opens on October 1st. At that point, we can't answer questions specifically in regards to your application and developing your application. We can answer general questions about the program, but nothing specific to an application that you're developing during that application window, open period. And then the last portion here is the appropriation or the amount of money that we get for the program is determined by Congress annually. And so we'll know the numbers that we'll be getting when the fiscal year 2021 budget is approved. And for the remainder of this, I'm going to turn it over to Penny.
Penny, I believe your line is muted.
Give her a second. She's okay. I'm just actually going to continue because she's having some technical difficulties. Next slide, please. Okay. And why you may be wondering why that says fiscal year 2013, $3.4 million, and then fiscal year 2014 through the current fiscal year is $4 million, because since fiscal year 2014, the annual appropriation for this program has been consistently at the $4 million level. That doesn't mean it won't go down for fiscal year 2021 or potentially go up. And we haven't heard anything that it will be going down or will be going up. So I think the $4 million mark will give you all a pretty good idea of what we think our funding level will be at next fiscal year. But again, we can either say yay or nay until Congress officially approves a budget for fiscal year 2021. Next slide, please. The grant application process, applications may be submitted in two ways. First, one way is paper, whether through mail or hand delivery, or grants.gov. Paper applications may be sent by the mail or shipping company or hand delivered. Mailing or shipping must be postmarked by, and you'll want to specifically note this if you're waiting till December 31st, being in the Alaskan time zone, but it must be postmarked by 11:59 Eastern Standard Time on December 31st. And hand-delivered applications must be received in the URD office by close of business on December 31st. So if you're sending a paper application through the mail, it must be postmarked by 11:59 Eastern Standard Time on December 31st. If you're hand delivering it, it must be hand delivered to the RD office by close of business on December 31st. The next slide will show you how to find your closest RD office. But before we go to the next slide, I just want to point out that the grants.gov applications, or the applications submitted electronically through grants.gov, must be submitted by 11:59 Eastern Standard Time on December 31st. Next slide, please. As I was talking earlier, the paper applications are submitted to your local RD office for single state applications. And you could go to that website there, browse by state to find your closest local RD office. And the national, and if you're going to have a project that is over multiple states, or your service area for the project is over multiple states, you'll want to see the application guide for the specific address of where to send the application to if you're going to be mailing it through the mail. Penny, you there? You want to take over now, or do you want me to keep going?
Let me try this one more time. Can you hear me?
Okay.
There you are.
Great. I'm sorry, but I really apologize about that earlier. The next slide, please. There you go. Thank you. We'll move into what the application process actually looks like here. Just to give you a big picture overview of what we do when the application actually comes in. Once December 31st passes, that door closes. So we gather all our applications together from grants.gov. We make sure we've got them all in from the states, or that if any were sent directly to us in the national office. We send all of the applicants an acknowledgement letter just to let you know we did get it. If it looks to be incomplete, then we'll ask you if you need to submit anything else. We will ask you at that time, and then we will go through as a team. Typically, we have two, minimum of 2 people, 2 reviewers, but some years we may have 3 reviewers. They typically are all coming from our national office. So Chris and I both were reviewers this past cycle, and another one of our coworkers was also a reviewer. And we independently review and score your applications, all of the applications. We don't compare the applications to each other. We do want to stress that the applications are stand on their own, and they're compared against the scoring criteria that's listed in the application guide, which you have in front of you, so you can put your application together to meet those criteria. And then basically we just rank the applications by score. Then selections are made at that point based on the score. We just basically go through until we run out of money, from the highest score down to the next until the money is gone. And then our administrator and our assistant administrator are the people who actually make the official funding decision. Chris and I and the other reviewers, we put our scores together and we just send, it's factually based. We just send all that information up the line. And then the funding selections are made at a higher level. Sometimes, and I would say pretty typically, we may reduce the requests across the board by a small amount, maybe 10% or so, just to be able to squeeze a couple of more applications in. So that's something to be aware of. Next slide, please. Now, the next few slides, just to give you a view, I'm not going to go through every single one of these, but I wanted you to see what we're looking at when we score our applications. There are 13 of these criteria that we are looking at. So you can see there, this is all coming out of our regulation, by the way. I want you guys to be aware that in our 7 CFR 1775, the regulation that Chris mentioned earlier, all of these scoring criteria come directly from the regulation. So these are not things that we determine on our own to prioritize. But you can see we look to see what type of your project, what type of area you're looking at. Multi-state projects will score higher. We do completely understand and realize that applications that are coming out of Alaska or even Hawaii, some of the really far outlying places, it's difficult to get a multi-state project, and we do recognize that, but because this is a regulatory item, we don't have any authority to change that. We also look at the applicant's experience, if you are putting how much contracting you intend to do, and we're looking to see that you're doing more of the work yourself rather than contracting it out. You can contract it out, and obviously that's eligible, but you get more points if you do more of it yourself. Next slide, please. And we look at other things. The lower income and the lower population areas are going to get more points. So these are things to keep in mind as you are putting your application together. We also look at the duration of the project that you're proposing, 12 months or less. And I think probably I would say it'd be safe to say 100% of the proposals that come through do say that they're 12-month projects. So that's pretty typical that most projects come through that way. Next slide, please. Now the next few are 7, 8, 9. Those are more subjective items that when we're doing reviews. So these are going to be the individual reviewer is going to read through your needs assessment, your goals and objectives, your work plan, and look for how clearly you're addressing your need. Are you supporting it with data? Are you saying we have a clearly defined need and here's what it is, you know, in the needs assessment? And then goals and objectives. Are we clearly identifying objectives that tie directly back to that need that we addressed? And the work plan we look at, does it give us a clear road, a clear strategy for how you are going to meet your goals and objectives? So I'm really stressing that word clearly defined because that is very important. So the more, I don't mean more by volume more, but the more specific you can be in giving us what your need is, what your goals and objectives are, what your work plan, what your strategy is, the more specific you can be in putting those items together, the higher your score will tend to be. And then the next item you can see there, you get up to 20 points if you're doing hands-on primarily to operators and managers, and you can get, that's easy to do. You can just make sure that you're focusing your project specifically to landfill managers or operators, and that's a higher scoring item. Next slide, please. Evaluation is another section that kind of ties back to the work plan and the goals and objectives, and the higher scoring applications or have very specific information there. So I would just as a tip, make sure that when you put your goals and objectives in there, you give them measurable outcomes. And that way, when you get to the evaluation section here, how you will evaluate the success of your project, you will score higher there because you have measurement standards to weigh them against. In-kind support, that's just if you're putting non-federal resources into the project, which Chris mentioned earlier, I believe. And then sustainability is another key point I would actually touch on a little heavily here. Is this program is for projects. I would use that word project. And so the government or the regulation, I'll say, does put priority on projects that can tell us, yes, we're gonna use your funding this year, but if we intend to continue this program or this project beyond the 12 months, here's how we intend to fund it without government support. It's just a way to tell us that you intend to continue this program, but it's not going to be reliant on our funding to fund 100% of your operation of that project. Next slide, please. Now, the next couple of slides are on what we call administrative discretionary points, and this is the one part of the scoring system that does and can, I'll say, that can change from year to year. The criteria we just went through, 1 through 13, come straight out of our regulation. Those will not change unless the reg changes. But these next points, administrative points, could change from year to year because these are things that are discretionary to whoever, whatever our administration's focus is that year. It could be one year it was prescription drug disposal, household hazardous waste. So it's just depending on what types of things that were initiatives at the time. Now, for fiscal year 20, which is what we're currently in, the points I'll tell you about are the ones that we use for fiscal year 20, but they may change for fiscal year 21. And we won't know that until after October 1st when we put our application guide out. But I just wanted to give you an idea. Poverty areas are always a high priority. Next slide. The past several years, we've had this top bullet here about composting programs. That's always been a high priority. It's been one of the points for administrative discretionary for as many years as I can think, in the last 4 or 5 at least. The second bullet there was just 3 different things that you could have, this or this or this. Landfill safety, solid waste, reducing the waste stream through reuse, or a smaller grant, less than $100,000. That was a new point that we added this year. Next slide. And also this year was a new point that we added. We're addressing emerging contaminants. That is something that's got in the last 12 months or so has gotten attention of our administration, and so we added it this year as another type of administrative point. I will make a statement here that on the admin points, if you are putting together an application, these administrative points are things that go obviously above and beyond what your sub score is for the first 13 of those criteria that we just talked about. And so they are a little more, I wouldn't say competitive, but specific. So if you do want to go for those administrative points, be very specific and read what we're asking for. So there's a word there, establish a composting program, address emerging contaminants. We're looking for projects that have identified, we have a problem with emerging contaminants and we are addressing it, and this is how. So that's just a tip, another tip or two for you as you're putting your applications together. Next slide, please. And as we wrap up here, just wanted to give you an idea of the time frame of how this program typically runs. As I said earlier, we make selections and then based on the ranking, and that typically happens in the last, I would say, 5 years that I've been around this program. It is usually May to June. So I would just tell you, if you put an application in, that feels like a long time between December 31st and May or June, but it just takes that long for us to read through, because these are long narrative applications and we do take our time with them and read through them, each one. And so that's the reason it takes some time to get the applications, the selections made. And then once the selections are made and you are advised of your status, the selections, the funding will happen before September 30th of, for instance, fiscal year or 2021 next year. And then your project will start October 1st and run through September 30th of the following year, which will be 2022. Next slide, please. Now, that was the overview of the solid waste program. I just wanted to touch on what the technical assistance and training grant program is, and I just have this one slide. I just wanted you to have a visual that although this program is under the same regulation as solid waste and it's very similar, here are what the main differences are. The objectives are different. They're, like Chris mentioned, they are geared to water and waste, water and sewer type applications and problems. And also, only private nonprofits are eligible for that program. And that concludes our presentation. And Charles, I will turn it back over to you.
Thank you. And now we will actually open it up to questions and answers. Before we do that, I would like to note that we are going to send everybody an evaluation today, and we would appreciate your feedback as it helps us to shape the types of presentations that we do, the topics that we cover, and the guests that we invite. If you do not feel comfortable in providing that via the evaluation, you can provide your feedback directly to ANA itself at anacomments@acf.hhs.gov. And with that, we will open it up for questions and answers. Is there any questions? You could type it in, or I could unmute you if you raise your hand.
I have a question if anyone can hear me.
We could hear you.
What's the average grant size and what's the total amount available?
Let me go back to let me answer your second question first. The grant amount, the grants that were awarded this past fiscal year was a little over $3.6 million. And as I mentioned earlier, it's been pretty consistent, the amount of funding level that we've gotten for the last several years. Going to your first question, which is the average grant size, we've seen grants as low as $30,000, $40,000, and there's grants as high as close to $1 million. It's really based upon what the project that you're presenting. And I kind of, again, point back to go onto our website and look at the applications funded or the grants funded list that we have. And as I said earlier, that would be the list up there right now is for fiscal year 2019, but that'll give you a good idea of not only the types of projects that were funded, but the amount of grant that was awarded to each project. And to your actual question, the average, it varies so much that it's hard to put a number on that question, because as I said, we go from anywhere from grants from 30 to 40,000 upwards to close to $1 million.
Thank you.
And as we wait for our next question, I just want to highlight too that if you look at the due dates for the USDA application, it opens in October. The deadline is December 31st. For those of you more familiar with ANA, that kind of aligns with our project timelines. Our applications are usually due in the spring, awarded by summer. So if you really time these, you could look at the USDA for the technical assistance pieces, and you could look at ANA to purchase the equipment or to do a deeper study, so that you're building that momentum, you're continually building that capacity, and you're helping your organization to move forward. That's part of the reason that we selected this topic, is because we want organizations in the ANA family to see that there's other funding opportunities that could align with your project and help you to build even further than just one funding opportunity. But you could start to develop these long-term sustainability plans. Drina, if there's any questions typed into the chat box, can I have you read them? Or is there anybody who wants to unmute their line and ask a question?
There are no questions in the chat box.
This is Andy Wall. Can anybody hear me?
Yes, we could hear you.
Okay. I had a question. I appreciate the clarification that this grant is for more technical assistance and training and not buying equipment. And I'm wondering, since you get that question so often, is there a place that you direct people to who ask that question, where there are grants available for buying equipment?
Well, this is Penny. I was going to actually say that in closing, we were so happy to hear that you guys have some grant programs through ANA, because that's this is a new resource for us to refer people to. Before Charles contacted me a couple of months ago, I wasn't even aware that ANA existed. So to answer your question, what we typically have done in the past, we have a Native American coordinator in our agency, USDA Rural Development, that we would refer people to, because he has a lot more outreach than Chris or I may have in that specific community. So that's typically what we've been doing in the past, but we will, now that we know about your organization, we certainly will be referring people to ANA if we can't help them.
Terrific. Thank you so much.
Any other questions?
This is Jack Smith. I have one more question, if no one else does. I don't want to dominate this, just one more.
Go ahead.
There's a huge amount of need in rural Alaska, and I'm sure everyone knows this, but in that 2019 report that I'll look up, have you funded, has this program funded anyone in rural Alaska in that year, in 2019 and 2020? Just, I know you haven't memorized it, but have there been many?
There have been a handful in each fiscal year, and we do get a number of applications from Alaska in general.
Okay. Thank you very much.
We'll take one more question.
And Charles, if I may add, just to go back to that, the question from the previous gentleman. So with that being said, in regards to, we funded a couple of these in Alaska in the last couple of fiscal years, in addition to getting a decent amount of applications. The state office there is a wonderful resource for questions and help in developing and working on the application, because they do get a decent amount of activity out of Alaska. And most of those applications are single state, so they stay at the state office there in Alaska. So I highly encourage you to reach out to that office with any questions you potentially have.
Thank you.
I have a quick question. This is Drina McIntyre. Is Jim Nordland still running the Alaska office?
The current program director there now is Robert, and the program director over the community programs and Russ Rural Utility Services division is Robert Chambers.
Thank you.
And I could forward his contact information to Charles, who could give that out to everybody, or you could just go onto Alaska's state page and you could find it there as well.
I would like to thank everyone for participating today, and we appreciate the participation and the questions. We like to try to provide as much information as possible, but addressing your guys' more specific questions is really what drives this home and makes it a valuable presentation for your organization. So we do appreciate you taking the time to ask questions. And we would like to close out by providing you our contact information for the Alaska Region Training and Technical Assistance Center. We also provide the national website for ANA, which gives a little more detail about the funding opportunities that the Administration for Native Americans funds, as well as the Technical Assistance Center contact information for the other regions. If you have any questions, you could reach out to myself at the end of today's webinar. And with that, I will stop the recording.